Walter White, chemistry teacher, Heisenberg, cancer patient, and the biggest liar. Breaking Bad isn't just about how a man started cooking meth because he got cancer. It goes way beyond that, and to make it all happen, we watched Walt tell lie after lie to everyone in his life. Skyler, Jesse, Hank, and most importantly, himself. In Season 5, Jesse discovers that Walter poisoned Brock and decides to burn down Walt's house. He douses the living room with gasoline, but Hank stops him before he can light the match. Hank then proposes they work together to take down Heisenberg. When Walter arrives home, he tries to clean up the gasoline, but can't get rid of the strong smell that's everywhere. So he invents a barely believable excuse. He claims the gas pump hose exploded while he was filling up his car, spraying gasoline all over his clothes and leaving the smell throughout the house. This type of weak lie might have worked for Walter in the earlier seasons, but by now, nobody believes his stories anymore. However, his son, in his innocence, assumes the fumes made his father pass out because of his cancer. Walter quickly goes along with this explanation and suggests they stay at a hotel for a few days until the smell clears out. At the end of Season 5, after Jesse discovers the whole truth about Walt, he disappears into hiding. Walter now worries that Jesse might do something reckless that could expose him, so he asks Jack's gang to kill Jesse, but they don't know where to find him. Walter comes up with a plan to draw him out. He visits Andrea, Jesse's girlfriend, and asks her to contact Jesse, telling him that Walter came looking for him. He also plants worry in Andrea's mind by suggesting Jesse might be in jail or back on drugs. The terrible thing is that Walter has no idea what he's setting in motion. Later, Todd will kill Andrea right in front of Jesse. Walter's manipulation ends up costing an innocent woman her life. When Walter first started cooking meth, Skyler began to notice something was wrong. Her husband was spending a lot of time away from home, acting strange and distant. When she discovered Jesse's phone number on their answering machine, she confronted Walter, demanding to know who this person was. Under pressure from his wife, Walter lied and said that his former student only sold him marijuana. He claimed he was just buying pot from Jesse, nothing more serious. Distrustful and determined to protect her family, Skyler went directly to Jesse's house to confront him herself. She demanded that he stop selling drugs to her husband, or else she would tell Hank and have him arrested. Jesse, caught off guard, could only listen as she threatened him. The dangerous part was the timing. If Skyler had shown up just a little bit earlier, she might have walked in on Jesse moving the dead body of Emilio. And well, who knows what would have happened then. At the beginning of Season 2, after Walter's supposed disappearance, Skyler began to suspect that her husband had a second cell phone hidden somewhere. Before he disappeared, she had seen him receive a call that wasn't registered on his regular phone. When Walt returned home, Skyler insisted on her theory, convinced she was right. But he repeatedly denied it, even lying by saying it was just an alarm to remind him to take his medication on time. Although she never fully believed him, she decided to let it go for the moment. That is until Walter, while heavily medicated after a procedure, accidentally let slip that he had more than one phone.
Your cell phone, did you bring it?
Which one?
His weak lies started to crumble over time, and when Skyler finally confirmed the truth about the second phone, she kicked him out of the house. This discovery also exposed the truth about many of his other lies. When Walter noticed a suspicious spot on his lung, he believed he had very little time left to live. He decided to make the most of whatever time remained and went out to the desert with Jesse to cook meth for several days straight. To justify his absence from home, he told Skyler that he was going to visit his mother in another city. However, this plan had a major flaw that Walter somehow overlooked. Although Skyler didn't have the best relationship with her mother-in-law, she could have easily picked up the phone and called to confirm her husband's whereabouts. This would have put Walter in an extremely difficult situation, since he had never told his mother about his lung cancer diagnosis. Then we have the fugue state. This lie could have actually worked perfectly if Walter hadn't later revealed that he had a second cell phone. When Walter disappeared for days and then showed up naked and confused in a supermarket, it created the perfect cover story. By presenting himself as weak, disoriented, and vulnerable, he made sure that no one in their right mind would think he was faking it. The fugue state became Walter's explanation for everything suspicious. His strange behavior, his absences, his second phone that Skylar had suspected. Even though Skylar deep down knew he was hiding something big, she couldn't prove anything. The lie was so convincing that even medical professionals believed something had genuinely happened to him. It gave Walter the perfect excuse and bought him time to continue his operation without raising more suspicion. Although Gretchen and Elliot only appeared in a few episodes, they were essential to understanding Walter's complex psychology and wounded pride. As a co-founder of Gray Matter Technologies, Walter always believed that Gretchen and Elliot had stolen his research and built their fortune on his work. In reality, his departure from the company was due to his own insecurity after discovering that his ex-girlfriend's family was extremely wealthy and he wasn't. After his cancer diagnosis, Gretchen and Elliot offered to pay for his entire treatment out of genuine concern, but Walt rejected their help, unable to accept what he saw as charity. Instead, he financed his chemotherapy with drug money. However, he lied to Skylar, assuring her that his old friends were covering all the medical expenses. This lie involuntarily dragged Gretchen and Elliot into his web of deception. When Skylar ran into Gretchen and thanked her for their generosity, Gretchen was confused and demanded that Walter tell his wife the truth immediately. When confronted about this, Walter reacted with anger and deep resentment, completely unable to admit the reality of his situation. We all remember the shocking and heartbreaking ending of the episode Phoenix, when Walter watched Jane die from choking on her own vomit and deliberately decided not to intervene or help her. Her death not only caused the tragic plane crash that killed hundreds of people, but it also plunged Jesse into a deep depression. He felt completely responsible for losing his girlfriend, believing it was his fault. Walter could have tried to save Jane's life, but decided not to because she represented a serious threat to his operation. She not only had Jesse under her control and influence, but she also knew far too much about Walter's secret life. She could have told Skylar everything, or worse, gone to the police. Walter understood very clearly that confessing the truth to Jesse would have been a grave mistake. Devastated by this knowledge, Jesse might have revealed Walter's entire criminal empire to both Skylar and Hank out of grief and rage. Although Jane's death also affected Walter on some level, he kept this terrible secret for more than a year. Then, in one of his cruelest acts, he confessed it to Jesse just to make him suffer and hurt him deeply. Despite everything, hiding the truth about what really happened that night allowed him to keep Jesse on his side for most of the series, making him a key piece in his entire operation. When Skylar expresses her fear about Walt's behavior and the danger he's putting the family in, Walt delivers one of the most iconic speeches in television history. It's a chilling moment of honesty wrapped in a lie. Walt is telling the truth about being dangerous, but he's lying about the safety of his family. Skylar is right to be afraid, not of external threats, but of Walt himself. He is the danger, and that's exactly why his family should be terrified. This speech is Walt at his most delusional. He thinks he's reassuring Skylar by proving how powerful he is, when actually he's confirming her worst fears.
I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger.
For Walter, the most important thing in Season 5 was his business and building his empire. After defeating Gustavo Fring, he had the opportunity to become the most powerful drug trafficker in New Mexico. However, unlike Fring, Walt didn't have a stable network or a reliable supply of chemicals needed for meth production. One of his biggest problems was methylamine. The team suspected that Lydia, their supplier, might be working against them or had cut them off. To find out the truth, they came up with an elaborate plan. They had Lydia call Hank at the DEA and nervously ask why there was a GPS tracker hidden under one of her methylamine barrels. This call would reveal who was actually tracking her shipments. This is where Walter pulls off one of his best lies. Despite going through a serious marital crisis with Skylar, his real priority is still his business above everything else. He shows up at Hank's office and, with carefully calculated acting, fakes a moment of deep vulnerability. He breaks down crying about his marriage falling apart, making Hank extremely uncomfortable. While Hank is distracted trying to console him, Walter secretly plants a microphone in the office. Thanks to this tactic, they listen in and discover that Lydia wasn't betraying them at all. The GPS tracker had been placed by DEA agents acting without proper authorization. With this cleared up, Lydia helped them get the information they needed to rob a train carrying a massive supply of methylamine. A few episodes later, Walter uses the exact same trick. He shows up at Hank's office, fakes another emotional breakdown about his marriage, and while Hank awkwardly tries to comfort him, Walter removes the microphone without raising any suspicion. Although this particular lie was originally Skylar's idea and plan, Walter had to perform it convincingly to maintain the entire facade they'd built. The official explanation they gave to everyone for his illegal income was that Walter had developed a serious gambling addiction. This story justified where the money came from, that he used to pay for Hank's expensive medical bills and to buy the car wash business. With his carefully crafted lie in place, Skylar and Walter could launder their drug money through the car wash business without raising any red flags or suspicion. As an added bonus, Hank was also gradually leaving the Heisenberg case behind, moving on to other investigations. However, the lie began to seriously unravel when Walt let his massive ego take complete control during a dinner with Hank and Marie. Under the influence of alcohol, Walter couldn't help himself and insinuated that Heisenberg was still out there and free. It all started because Hank spoke about Gale as if he were a true genius and the real Heisenberg. This deeply bothered Walter since he always desperately seeks recognition and credit for his brilliance. His pride and arrogance led him to suggest that Gale wasn't the real Heisenberg, planting a seed of doubt in Hank's mind. This doubt would eventually lead Hank to continue his investigation with renewed energy, which would ultimately lead him to discovering the shocking truth about his own brother-in-law. At the end of Season 3, Jesse was missing and hiding from Gustavo after trying to eliminate two of his dealers. He wanted revenge for what they did to Tomas, Andrea's little brother, but Walter ended up killing those dealers himself to save Jesse. After this incident, Frank wanted to completely cut ties with Walter and Jesse to eliminate the problem. Gus started pressuring Gale to learn the blue meth formula as quickly as possible. Somehow, Walter figured out that once Gale learned the complete formula, Frank would immediately get rid of both him and Jesse. They would no longer be necessary or useful. So Walter devised a desperate plan with Jesse. They had to kill Gale so that Gustavo wouldn't fire them, or even worse, kill them both. Jesse managed to get Gale's home address, and when Walter was about to drive to his apartment to handle it himself, Victor intercepted him. Victor took him to the lab with the excuse that some equipment was malfunctioning and needed Walter's expertise. But when they arrived, Mike was waiting there with a gun, ready to execute Walter on Gus's orders. However, Walter acted incredibly quickly and lied so convincingly that he actually managed to stop his own execution. In a last, desperate attempt to survive, he pretended to cooperate fully by offering to give up Jesse's exact whereabouts. But instead of betraying Jesse, he secretly ordered Jesse to go eliminate Gale immediately. His lie was so absolutely perfect, and his performance so believable that even Mike, a professional criminal, was genuinely impressed. Walter was cunning and quick-thinking under extreme pressure. Hank was absolutely determined to catch his brother-in-law and bring him to justice, but he had no solid evidence against him that would hold up in court. The situation became much worse when Walter recorded a confession video in which he completely manipulated all the facts and blamed Hank for being the real Heisenberg. In the recording, Walt claims that his brother-in-law forced him to be his chemist through threats and intimidation. He says Hank was involved in the war against Gustavo Fring, and that Hank was injured during this conflict. He claims Hank was responsible for the explosion at the nursing home that killed Gus. And to make matters even worse, he says that Hank's medical treatment and physical therapy had been financed with drug money from the operation. This elaborate setup left Hank in an extremely dangerous position. Without any hard evidence against Walter, everything could easily turn against Hank instead. His career would be destroyed, and he might even face criminal charges himself. Fortunately for Hank, Jesse decided to join forces with him to finally finish off Walt and end his reign. But if this hadn't happened, if Jesse hadn't turned against Walter, Hank might have had absolutely no choice but to keep quiet and leave Walter completely alone, letting him continue his criminal activities. Perhaps the most recurring and repeated lie throughout the entire show is Walter claiming that he did everything for his family. He says this over and over again to justify his actions, but deep down, we all know that's not the complete truth. At least not in the later seasons of the show. In the very beginning, it really was all for his family. He wanted to leave them money after his death. but later on his motivation became much more selfish. He liked feeling that sense of power and control. He enjoyed being Heisenberg and being feared. But in the final episode, Felina, when absolutely everything had crumbled and fallen apart around him, he had his last private moment alone with Skylar. In this scene, he finally admits that everything he did was really for himself. He liked it, he was good at it, and it made him feel alive. For most of Season 4, Jesse and Walter were constantly fighting, and this terrified Walter. Without Jesse, he had no real power. Jesse had drifted to Mike and Gustavo's side, trusting them far more than Walter. Desperate to get Jesse back, he does something truly unforgivable. He poisons Brock, an innocent child. Then he makes Jesse's ricin cigarette disappear after a visit to Saul's office. When Brock gets sick, Jesse immediately puts it together and suspects Walter took the ricin to poison the boy. Jesse storms into Walter's house, gun in hand, ready to kill him, but Walter delivers a masterful performance. He convinces Jesse that Gustavo Fring orchestrated everything to turn them against each other. Jesse ends up blaming himself, believing Brock somehow found the ricin cigarette he'd lost. Throughout Season 5, Walter keeps manipulating him. He acts wounded and offended, claiming Jesse overreacted by trying to kill him over something he had nothing to do with. Here's an interesting behind-the-scenes fact. Bryan Cranston wasn't told his character actually poisoned Brock. The writers kept this secret during filming, which is why Walter's lie looks so convincing and genuine on screen. In the end, Jesse becomes furious at Gus for supposedly poisoning a child and joins Walter to take him down. Thanks to his elaborate lie, Walter got exactly what he wanted. Jesse back on his side to help eliminate Gustavo Fring. But the cost was devastating. Walter used an innocent child as a pawn in his twisted game. This lie stands as perhaps his most evil act, showing just how far he'd fallen and how completely he'd become Heisenberg. So what do you think was Walt's worst lie? Let me know in the comments.